After playing Red Dead Redemption, everyone wants to recreate the Wild West, also known as the Old West, which was a truly fantastic period in American history. There were no quick-draw artists who could fire a six-gun out of your hand with a second six-gun. It is now obvious that a large portion of the genuine West has been depicted in popular culture. But weren't the principles sound? The presence of weapons, the lack of legislation, the ongoing Indian attacks? Well, not exactly. In this video, we will highlight some myths from the Old Wild West. But before that, make sure to subscribe to Roots and press the bell icon for more informative videos. Some common myths you probably still believe are: Number 1. Settlers were constantly clashing with Indians. The myth. Similar to how The Walking Dead portrays its zombies, old westerns often depict Native Americans as being subject to abrupt, fatal ambushes at any time. Anyone planning an adventure into Indian land was advised to come prepared with weapons. Circle the wagons is still used as colloquial for hunker down and fight back. When they anticipated a Cherokee or Sioux invasion, wagon trains would circle the wagons to create a perimeter of protection. And since we know that a startlingly high number of people perished as settlers traveled westward, all of this must be true. Those pioneers had to have spent their entire days dodging arrows and firing weapons. The reality. In actuality, no. Of course, the American cavalry and, well, pretty much every tribe you can think of. Things got lovely and massacre-y. But there were almost always conflicts between American immigrants pulling covered wagons and Aboriginal Americans. Fewer than 1,000 of the tens of thousands of pioneers who deliberately traversed Nebraska were killed by Native Americans. Nor hundreds, nor even tens of thousands, we claim, ranging from 300 to 400. Only 1 to 4% of all fatalities on the Oregon Trail can be attributed to Native Americans, as there were between 10,000 and 30,000 pioneer deaths on the trail from all causes, including illness. The settlers killed almost 400 Native Americans at this period. That figure suggests that the vast majority of settlers never fought a violent conflict with hostile tribes, even though it is not zero. The ordinary settler was considerably more likely to engage in trade or employ guides from other tribes than to engage in conflict with Native Americans. Number 2. Bank robbing outlaws ruled the West. The myth. The Dalton Gang, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid, and Black Bart were all renowned for their daring thefts. They could rob banks that had a little less protection than a modern hot dog shop of Old Fortunes. The reality. Research has only been able to confirm only 8 actual bank robberies, which span more than 15 states in 40 years. 8. In comparison, in 2010, there were 5,600 bank robberies. Even if we had never seen a Western in our lives, that sum would seem modest. But there are many factors to consider. In those early, much smaller villages, the sheriff's office, tavern, general store, and bank were generally placed together for ease. This one-stop social needs block frequently made up the dead center of the town. You were certainly breaking the law when you committed your major theft, since the sheriff's office was sometimes just a few doors away. Number 3. Cowboys are an American creation. The myth. The Old West has always been so beloved by Americans in part because it is so uniquely American. The more American, the more of a cowboy you are. The reality. Cowboys weren't even a creation of the United States. They are really 20 years older than Plymouth Rock, making them older than America itself. The first cowboys were Mexican cattlemen known as vaqueros, who embodied every stereotype of a cowboy. They invented all the terms used in cowboy culture, such as bronco, lariat, and even stampede. Long-distance cattle drives were ridden by vaqueros, whose sombreros were perhaps the forerunners of modern cowboy hats. It also lived the cowboy lifestyle for around 200 years. Number 4. Cowboys wore cowboy hats. The myth. Of course, the Stetson hat, which the majority of us just refer to as a cowboy hat, is the essential component of the cowboy costume. The boots are always an option as well, but they sort of go together as a pair. The hats had a strong focus on utility and were meant to be lightweight and useful. You could protect yourself from the heat and the rain with their curved edges, and they made you appear really fashionable as you spent weeks at a time essentially staring at cows. The reality. It's true that a lot of individuals back then wore hats, but they didn't appear to be wearing any of the traditional cowboy hats. Here is Billy the Kid with a bizarre top hat. Here's Wild Bill Hickok wearing a woman's flat pancake hat. But what you would have seen mostly back then were bowler hats. They gained popularity because they were a bit more adaptable in a variety of social settings, especially at a period when men wore hats constantly. This hat is the ancestor of every cowboy hat worn today. All the curling and embellishments came later, and it's probably not the first thing that comes to mind when you think of cowboy hats, is it? Number 5. Guns were rampant in the Old West. The myth. We know that cowboys carried 6-shooters on their hips even if they lacked cowboy hats. Every man, woman, and kid had a vintage revolver when they were brought up, which they could use for everything from hunting and self-defense to recreation and celebration. The reality. Contrary to popular belief, gun control regulations may have been tighter in the West in the late 19th and early 20th century than they are now. There was undoubtedly gun violence in the beginning, since there was no conventional legislation or effective mechanism to police it, but the Wild West wasn't wild for always. The demand for an acceptance of firearms began to decline as towns and villages increased. 25 years into the westward expansion, beginning in 1878, action was finally taken. Even lawless communities like Dodge City began putting signs like these. So these were a few myths from the Wild West. We hope you liked the video. If so, then please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and press the bell icon for more interesting videos on Wild West and many other astonishing topics. If you want to watch our previous video on Wild West, then click on the pop-up banner on your top right. You can also visit our playlist of Wild West. Thanks for watching Roots.